You can be as clumsy as, well, me, and screw up your legs 6 ways to Sunday, and that thing will still sit sturdily upon the ground. That's why I chose to craft just such a stool for my friend Laura Dunn's documentary film, Look and See, a documentary about Wendell Berry, which will be coming out next year. It's doing festivals right now. I wanted to remove all possible chances of error because we were making this stool quickly for post-production of the film. Now, I was already tickled beyond belief to be a cheerleader and co-producer of this film, but imagine my elation when she asked if I would make a stool so that they could film it for the documentary to underscore a section in which Mr. Berry speaks in a moving way about people who make things, especially artists. We all come from divorce now. This is an age of divorce. Things that belong together have been taken apart, and you can't put it all back together again. What you do is the only thing that you can do. You take two things that ought to be together, and you put them back together. Two things, not all things. That's the way the work has to go. You make connections in your work. I reckon I'm no filmmaker, but you'll put this film together by seeing how the parts of it belong together. The film, the made thing, becomes a kind of an earnest of your faith in and your affection for the great coherence that we miss and would like to have again. Well, that's what we do, we people who make things. If it's a stool, or a film, or a poem, or an essay, or a novel, or musical composition, it's all about that. Finding how it fits together and fitting it together. And clearly, since he said stool first, Mr. Berry holds that art form above the lower or more base creations such as poetry and music. Therefore, Laura thought it appropriate to film my hands and tools crafting a stool, and I do believe it may be the peak of my career in film because my face is never seen. So that's a sampling of what you'll find. I'll be honest, that's all the good parts. But there's a lot of really nice pictures. There's a quiz. My dad is a retired school teacher, and he makes one of his custom quizzes that you can take about wood. There's a 4-page homoerotic comic book about me and Chris Pratt cutting down a tree by my good friend Ethan Nicole, who draws Axe Cop and Armageddon, very talented graphic novelist. My friend, the muckraking graffiti artist Pat Riot does a collage for each woodworker that's really rife with secrets. When the apocalypse comes, I do have a plan to relocate to a place in the Pacific Northwest. Chris Pratt and I are going to navigate by the stars. If there are any Freemasons in the house, it's location 3. But the map, the route is also detailed in the secrets of Pat Riot's collages. So if you have the valor to discern that, I hope to see you there. It's so fun. I'm very proud of it. It's so good looking, and it's the result of an incredible amount of hard work on all these people and many more, the actual bookmaking people as well. So I hope you enjoy it, and thank you so much for coming to our first ever Offerman Woodshop Pleasure Fair. Hopefully we'll make it a regular thing. And I'm not sure if it was clear, because I was around the crowd a lot, but this establishment we're in is called Angel City Lumber, and our pals Jeff and Charles run it, and they just started, but they've got a mill, they've got a kiln, they've got a gorgeous, enormous Tanowitz bandsaw, and they're going to be taking trees from Los Angeles. What you're seeing are all trees that would have gone to the landfill, and they've instead turned them into reclaimed lumber that we can all use to make things out of. So keep an eye on Angel City Lumber. It's going to be an amazing source for material for all of us. And thank you again to them for having us. Now, just a show of hands, because I signed a lot of books before we started. Who has a book that I haven't signed yet? Okay, you may leave. So I'd like to take a little time to answer any questions if you have questions, and then we'll get to signing books if you guys are game. If you have a question, just speak up and then I'll repeat it to the crowd. And if you don't, I'll go get a taco. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Lucas, and I live in an apartment building, so I'm interested in woodworking, but obviously power tools aren't the direction I go down. So you mentioned taking the paddles using hand tools, but I was wondering if there are any ideas you have for projects that would require power tools and the kinds of hand tools.
Sure, great question. Nick lives in an apartment building, and so there's a couple ways, what can you do in a place where you don't have really room for a shop, where you can't really use power tools? I have a fantasy of this because I've thought about it a lot. If you have a corner of a room that you could hang a curtain, that you could put up a butcher's curtain and have a little lathe, that is something that doesn't make a huge mess, and it's pretty quiet. It's incredibly satisfying, and you can make a ton of different stuff with a lathe. That's a very specialized, set of objects that you can make, mostly round work is what I would recommend. But no, things that you can make with hand tools, obviously the smaller the better. As a rule of thumb, the more electricity you use, the more noise and the more dust you're going to make. And so things like canoe panels or spoon carving, or if you have the room for a shave horse, there are lots of kinds of chairs that you can make that require very little power tools. And I made my first Windsor chair at the end of last year. It's in the book with Peter Galbert is one of the heroes. He's this great teacher and chair maker. But those guys, if you look into Windsor chairs, ladder back chairs, and spoon carving, that's a section of woodworking that's very unplugged, that I think can do you a lot of good. But the other thing to look for, if you're in an urban setting, which we are, is places like Allied Workshop, and there are other community workspaces and what they call maker spaces around town where, if you wanted to, you could go in there and cut out your canoe paddle blanks on somebody's bandsaw for $12 for the time that you're in there. It's something wonderful that's going on all over the country, is that makers are getting together and creating these spaces where you can do the power tool work that you need to, and then maybe do the hand tool work at home. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
So I watch a lot of your stuff, big fan, and it always seems like you're having so much fun on these projects and TV shows. But I'm curious, do you do a lot of this stuff, or any at all, in your downtime? Like when you're working on a project and you have a few days here and there, do you go home and work on stuff, or go to a shop, or do anything just for you, not for resale, just to kind of unwind? And if so, what is that? Or if it's just part of a long-term project?
Well, I guess your question is, what do I do to unwind?
With woodworking, yeah.
Or with woodworking. Well, part of this book, it's funny. The great thing about woodworking is you're all, you know, if things are going right, you're always doing something for sale, you know, or for recompense of another sort, like you're making your wife a dining table so that you will be paid with kisses, which is a fine paycheck. And so, you know, before Parks and Rec, I had more time to make stuff because I was working as an actor just like half the time. But it was more journeyman where, you know, nobody knew who I was, and it was like, hey, I do 3 episodes of 24, or you know, and it was just a cool job, but then I'd go back to my shop. And then once Parks and Rec started, it was amazing the way it stepped up how much work I was getting, and you know, you make that leap where they put it in the newspaper that you're gonna do a job. So post Ron Swanson, it would have been like, here's a news item, Nick Offerman's doing 3 episodes of 24. Whereas I did the same job before and nobody gives a shit. Same face. And so once I got more busy that way, my woodworking time became way more precious. And so I don't know that I'll ever make a commission piece again. Like I love weighing in on what the shop is doing, but they're all pretty much all better than me now. While I've been off dancing, they're all becoming amazing woodworkers. So I love to show up and be like, hey, how did you do this? You know, maybe here's another way to think about it, because we all just love putting our heads together, but it's getting to where the shop is like surpassed me. And that was another important reason for me to make this about all of us, because I'll be learning from them soon, and happily so. In writing the book, I had a bit of an epiphany that I was doing the right thing. Like by making a book about the shop, all of my acting people had to leave me alone, because the book is part of the business. So they were like, okay, as long as you're doing a book, then you can go to the shop for 4 months. So I did, and it worked, where I really was like, oh, this was a really smart move. And that was in March. And at that time, I started saying no. I've said no to every job since March. And my calendar, it literally, this is the last thing. So this is the end of my career tonight. You guys are all here. I had a great run, and thank you for being a part of it. So I got nothing coming up, and I'm really excited because I'm gonna I still have to finish up some. I have a movie coming out with Michael Keaton called The Founder, so I have to do press for that. You know, there's still things like that. But I don't have any jobs taking me to Calgary for 3 months or whatever. And so I got a pile of wood that's been sitting in my shop for a couple of years that I cut out to make ukuleles. And I'm gonna do my damnedest to get in there and make a bunch of ukuleles. And so, I mean, yes, I'm desperately trying to get to do some woodworking for myself. And most of the woodworking I'll do going forward, excuse me, that was a delicious grilled cheese. I was just reminded. Most of what I'll do going forward will be for me, although some of it I'll probably write a book about it, or, you know, like, I will still need to keep paying my mortgage. So it's finding a balance, you know. It's like make a bunch of stuff for me and then be like, all right, I'm gonna make a stickly table for this episode of This Old House. Or no, that's not a good example of a money job. But you know what I mean. So the nice thing is, for me, even just getting to go to my shop, the shop is something that I've made, and the people there. The community, the fellowship is something that I'm partly responsible for. And so just getting to be there and taking part, and just, you know, somebody's like, hey, the bandsaw is having this problem, and just getting to be part of the shop is sort of a family vacation that even if I don't get my hands dirty, that I find really comforting. Yes, sir.
You said that you were inspired by Green and Green, the architecture. What inspired you with the whole architecture, and is there a house that you particularly like?
The question is, what about the architectural work of Green and Green inspired me, and was any specific work of theirs? I was building scenery professionally for many years, and so I was well versed in working in a shop. And then I moved from Chicago to LA, and I couldn't find the same scenery / acting balance. So I started building. I built a deck in the hills, and it was inspired by Frank Lloyd Wright. I built some railing panels that looked like his stained glass windows. And those were my first half-lap joints. And I was, kind of learning about waking up to woodworking beyond scenery. And then I built a cabin in a guy's yard, and then I built another yoga studio, and the cabin was timber frame. And then the yoga studio, by then, I was really catching on to like the craftsman movement. I'd seen the Gamble House, and couldn't even comprehend it yet, but I loved it. I mean, I loved the exposed joinery, just the style, If left to my own devices, my wife and I would live in a stone and lodge where everything was bear skins, even the napkins. And fortunately, she has a more refined taste. So I started building this yoga studio in West LA, and I designed it inspired by the Green and Green built houses, and it was cutting that big timber frame joinery for that yoga studio where I suddenly realized this is a larger version of how furniture used to be made, and that's when I was like, you guys, I want to make tables with no screws, and somebody gave me fine woodworking, so I had this crazy awakening to what woodworking was. So I mean, I've only seen the Gamble House and the Blacker House in person, and there's stuff at the Huntington Library and like furniture pieces, and the books of Daryl Pert, is that his name?
I think.
He writes those Green and Green furniture books. That the whole jam of like taking the craftsman, the arts and crafts aesthetic, which is so, it really appeals to me because it's so honest. It's just like, here's the structure, we'll stick the tenon out a little farther and put a wedge into it. And so it's simple, but it's the nobility of hard work. So the actual joinery holding the table together is also the decoration. And then Green and Green just took that and was like, well, what if we made it slightly Japanese or Chinese? And I think that's really elegant, but it allows you, I'm not into a lot of gingerbread. I like Mother Nature to be the star of any piece that I make. And that's why I love the Nakashima slab tables, which go well hand in hand with Green and Green style stuff. Because if you choose your wood correctly and you finish your tabletop, then you're just getting out of the way of Mother Nature, who's made this incredible work of art. So that's, I haven't seen a lot of Green and Green houses, but what I have, I'm very moved and inspired by. It's also funny though when you hear the numbers of the Gamble House of like how many dudes they had in the yard working and how it would cost like $150 million to make that house today. Kind of puts it in perspective where you're like, okay, maybe I'll just do like an ottoman. Anybody else? I see far in the back, you're pointing over there. Now you're pointing down, and there you are. Go, sir, you're in the dark. Don't apologize. What sort of finish do I recommend for most projects? Yeah, good question. I think generally me and my shop, I don't like gloss. Gloss to me looks like the 70s and 80s, and it looks ostentatious to me. And also, just because of the organic way my shop developed and my dislike of gloss, I've never sprayed a finish. I have friends with shops who spray finishes, and especially those that need expedience, they love to spray lacquer because it goes quickly and it's a durable finish. I have just always loved a hand-rubbed oil finish, and as the shop has developed and matured, we develop what that means, a hand-rubbed oil finish. It's some sort of combination of oil, varnish, beeswax, sometimes a urethane. It depends if it's a dining table or a picture frame, how durable the finish needs to be. But by and large, for our stuff, kind of based on what I was just saying about getting out of the way, like, I don't want somebody to ever look at a piece we made and say, wow, what a shiny finish, like it's a Corvette. I don't want them to notice the finish. I want the finish to accentuate the luster and the color and the grain and the figure of what Mother Nature has done. So, we do a lot of hand-rubbed oil stuff. And there's lots of great, these days you can get great recipes and make your own, or there's lots of great products on the market. For a lot of our stuff that has to go out quickly, we use a product called Emmett's Good Stuff. It's not the greatest, most badass finish, but it does the trick. In a couple coats, it does a really nice job, and it dries quickly, so we can get stuff shipped out. But if we're doing something that's like a masterpiece of a table, we'll research the finish. Usually, then things lean more towards like tung oil, and you build up coats if you want it to be like a museum quality piece. But it's very much to each his own. I think the only thing we share in our shop is that we like a satin luster, and we like to rub it on by hand. And we also, by the way, if we do like a big conference table, we job it out. We send it out to a finisher because we would lose money if we hand rubbed a tung oil finish on something like that. So we're not experts across the board of finishes, and we're happy that we know people who are. There's a couple other, yes sir.
So if you're a young worker and you get to a point where you feel like, I think this is pretty good, someone may be interested in buying this someday, how do you get your stuff out there? How do you get people interested?
Well, good question. If you're a young woodworker and you think your stuff is pretty good, how can you get to where you're selling it to people? How do you get in touch? Well, there's the internet, right? I don't know. Honestly, we are what are technically referred to lucky assholes in the woodworking business, because when I started, I knew people in town that wanted custom pieces and could afford it. So even like the people I was building these cabins for, it fed right into, now I'm making Nakashima tables, and they were like, great, I'll take two. And so I had the luxury of having clients, because of the acting work I was doing, and the people I knew through my wife's show, Will and Grace. Like, I was tapped into people who were building houses and designing interiors and whatnot. And then once we staffed up the shop, it went hand in hand with, I had no idea that by them making Ron Swanson a woodworker, that it would actually turn into a burgeoning interest for Offerman Woodshop, but it really has. And it has a lot to do with us all being here tonight. I wouldn't be writing books if it wasn't for Ron Swanson and that readership. I started touring as a humorist, I'm a theater actor, so that was new for me. colleges invited me, and I wanted to say some things to the young people, so I agreed, and then I became a humorist, and it was weird, because usually I didn't appear as myself. But then I really enjoyed it, and I said, I would like to keep saying things to people. So I wrote my first book, and my second, and here we are. And so, that really helps our shop a great deal. If I had to guess, I would just say probably the most important thing you can do is make unique work. If you just make like a kick-ass shaker blanket chest that you saw in fine woodworking, that's going to be impressive and you may well sell it to people. But if you somehow put a twist on it or come up with an object that is more attractive or eye-catching, that's probably going to help. But I'm not the best person to ask. There's probably many people here who could answer that question better because they're in that boat. I'm a lucky bastard, so I could probably make a board and sign it, and people would be like, yeah, call it a bacon holder. I'll trade my child for it. I recommend in the book, through many of the people I interviewed for the book, that you don't try and make woodworking your career. The same as acting. When people ask me how to get, how do I make it? I say, don't try and make it as an actor. It's a horrible life full of rejection. Even if you do well, it's still a really hard life. And so I recommend that you find a way to have a fruitful life, which is how I ended up making it as an actor, was by filling my life outside of it and sort of eschewing showbiz. And I said, so if they want me, they'll call. And they did. But I would say, find a happy life, build a life for yourself that includes woodworking. And if somehow it organically then can support you, it may mean moving to Ontario, it may mean that you become. Be careful what you wish for, because you could become the bread box king of North Hollywood, and you're like, well, we're making a living, but it's studio furniture is a beautiful thing to engage in, but I think it's pretty difficult. But that's part of why I do this, is to try and bring our society back to the notion that handmade quality that will last for generations is not only a beautiful thing to participate in, but it's a very green choice, We've used up all the good trees. We're filling our landfills with bullshit from IKEA and Crate and Barrel. Buy one of these tables. Yes, it's more expensive, but your great-grandchildren will think it's pretty dope. Yes, sir.
Yesterday I was gifted a small pile of ironwood
Mm-hmm.
from my blacksmith boy, and I planned to put it on some cleavers and some knives, but I've never worked with it before, and I'm very amateur woodworker and blacksmith, so kind of perfect that I can ask you if there's anything else that I can do. I was looking at your meat paddles, I thought something like that, because they're pretty good sizes, some of those.
So the question is, you've got some small pieces of ironwood. What can you make with them? Throw it away. I'm just kidding. I've only worked with ironwood, I think, is a general term that covers a lot of South American species, like ipe, and I've used it for decking. And it's incredibly hard, hence the name. And so I would never try and do anything in a wood shop with ironwood because it will presumably dull your tools too quickly and be hard to work with. However, if they're pleasing shapes or seem like they could make a good, a viable cheese board or something, that would just require some sanding and some oil, then you could do something like that with it. But generally, if a wood is too ornery, we bypass it, you know, for something that is easier to work with. But I've only used it for decking. But even decking, like just drilling and countersinking your screws, you go through bits because it's just so hard. And some of it has silica in it, which dulls your steel really quickly. Sure. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
You talk a lot about completely wood pieces, all the pieces you're beautiful. How do you feel? Is there a place in your heart for pieces that are, the wood is still the star, but there's stone, there's metal?
Is there a place in my heart for pieces that also have metal and stone?
Stones, the wood is the star.
No, I hate it. I hate all other materials. Anybody else? No, sure. It's a funny thing. People often conflate me with Ron Swanson, so they'll say, like, a good example is I'll meet somebody and they'll say, my wife really wanted to come meet you, but she was afraid to because she's a vegetarian. I actually get that quite a bit. Or people will say, like, hi, I run a CNC shop, I'm sorry. And I'll be like, why? Like, I don't give a shit. Like, I love anyone that makes stuff, and there's few things cooler than a CNC router setup or laser cutters, all that stuff. It's amazing, it's so dope. And we often depend on them, like, Thomas will turn a bat, but then we like need some crazy logo. He often wood burns them, but we send stuff out all the time to depend on our particular aesthetic. We keep robots out of the shop just because that's our bag. Is like we make our joinery, you know, with our hands and our tools, and that's our specific niche. But no, stone and glass and metal are amazing combined with wood, and we use, you know, steel sometimes, and it's quite lovely. We're just a really wood-centric shop, but in general, I love the creative things that people do. Although I will say, I've seen a lot, and I think because of how accurate people can get with CNC work these days, been seeing a lot of like metal butterfly keys or combinations of wood and metal that raise my eyebrow, because you're like, man, it looks super dope, like inlaid brass and a walnut top. I'm like, in a few years, I'd be interested to see what happens once the wood expands and contracts. But that's what we're all dealing with all the time. We're working on a big table right now that's riddled with bug holes and checking, so there's a lot of epoxy filling all this stuff in, and it looks nice, and that's our best guess at the moment as to like how to effectively fill that stuff. But I would love to see it in 5 years and see how it's doing, and, you know. But sure, anybody who makes anything, I encourage people to make things with their hands. You can make wood work, you can make lasagna, you can make stained glass windows, you can make cowboy boots, you can make orgasms. These are all things we make with our hands that enlarge our lives and bring us love. That's a good ending point. Thank you very much. I'm going to go to a table over there where we'll line up now. Oh, before I do, everyone check under your chair. Does someone have a ticket taped under their chair? This is very exciting.
He's fucking with us.
Feel free to pull the chair apart. No ticket. Nobody? That'd be dope if I won. There, you have the ticket. Sir? you are the proud winner of this inflatable eagle pool floater. Congratulations. I'm not sure if we figured out a system. The way I like to do this is if if there's going to be a long line, we'll get through it pretty quickly, but feel free to keep your seats. I'd hate to see people stand in line for a long time. And also, I'm very grateful. Yeah, buddy. That's very pleasing. What a country. Only now do I believe America might be great again. It's up to us. I'm very grateful to you for coming and giving a shit about this whole thing, and I look forward to shaking your hand. But I'd ask you to leave your phones in your pockets. I don't like making this about your phones. I like making it about getting to meet you. Thank you very much.